I worked at Rikers Island in the jail from 1973 to about 2010, so 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Wow.
So I have certainly a sense of what it's like there, and I know what's going on now. I can say that during the time I was there, the health care provided the inmates was really poor. The city originally, when I started working there, was providing the health care directly, and that was decent, but in those days there were mostly young, healthy people, you know. Then when HIV came and other things, tuberculosis came, that wasn't true anymore. And the city, at some point around, I don't know, in the 1980s, I think, or maybe 85, started contracting out to at first to a hospital. That was pretty good, but then to a private hospital. In New York, we have public hospitals and private hospitals, and that really, and then from there they went to an actual profit-making company that provides healthcare in prisons all over the country. There are several like that. So it's a typical thing in this country that it's driven by money. So they turned to what they thought was a cheaper way of providing healthcare. And they were really awful, and things really deteriorated. There were so many complaints. There were investigations in the early 2000s. And finally, the city gave it back to Health and Hospitals, which is the city-run system. And I believe since then that things have improved in terms of the level of care, the kind of care provided.
I would like to know something about the prisons, because you work like a doctor like this. So what challenges do you think are they having just now in this moment with COVID?
Right. Well, it's especially bad in the worst place is Cook County, where Chicago is in Illinois. That is the worst. But the federal prison system is very heavily hit. I do know on Rikers Island, to step back, the prison is a perfect incubator for any infectious disease. The people are all close to each other, and there's poor ventilation, there's poor sanitation. And the thing about it is, I mean, I think about those guys all the time. They don't have a choice about it. And they know there's a risk of something that could kill them that's there. And they don't have, maybe they wouldn't want to take protections. They wouldn't want to stay 6 feet away. Maybe they wouldn't, but I think most of them would. But they don't have, no one there has a choice, including the staff, including the guards. And at Rikers Island, so, you know, in Rikers Island, there are now, I think they've got the population under 4,000 people. And there are now, I believe, about 400 cases among the inmates, and a little bit more than that among the correction officers, the guards, I'll call them. They hate being called guards, but that's what I always think of them as. So, and so it's much higher rate of infection in Rikers Island than in the rest of New York City. And New York City is way higher than maybe the rest of the country or has been. So it's a very big problem. I think I shouldn't say only, but only one or a small number of people have died so far in Rikers Island from the virus, which is good. But the chance of it, that's certainly not under control, that situation. And
because you have several people in the cell, no?
Yeah.
Living as well.
Okay.
And
at Rikers Island, they have what are called dormitories in some places where the inmates are sleeping 2 feet apart from each other. And what they've done is they should sleep with the head on one end and the feet on the other end of the bed as a precaution. And they eat right next to each other. they're in a yard, if they're allowed to go outside, they're all next to each other. And meanwhile, the guards, they change a shift every 12 hours, and the guards are coming in and out every single day from New York City, where there's plenty of virus, and they're going in there and bringing the virus in. And they're at great risk also. And so it's like the disparities.
But do they have masks or gloves or things like this? Hygiene field?
I don't think that inmates have that. I think that the guards are requesting that, and they have access to it, which is important, because I think that's where, clearly, if the inmates are all stuck in there, they're the ones not bringing it in. So there is some precautions like that. I think, it's like the other disparities that are the trouble with the healthcare system in general. The pre-existing is being shown up and revealed much more now. The same thing's true with our jail system. And it's probably true, it's in Chicago and the rest of the country too. But just to put it in perspective, when I started working there in 1973, during the early years, there were 19,000 people in the New York City system. That's bigger than a lot of countries have people incarcerated. The US still leads the world at 2.3, I think, million people. And the problem with the so-called system, the people on Rikers Island, 80% of them all along have been people who are not convicted of any crime. That's the difference between a prison and a jail. It's something that people think
I don't
about.
know. No.
Right. A jail is where you're convicted of a crime and you're serving your sentence. The prison, it's like in a small town, they would call it a lockup. They just arrest people, right? And they're charged with something. And in New York, those 80% on Rikers Island in New York City system, and I call it a jail system mostly, 20% they're serving short sentences, maybe a year or less, or minor crimes. Otherwise, they would go into the state system. So even those people, you could argue, is it so great to keep them in jail for a year at a great expense? Maybe we could help them become, have a better life, and a better life for a society. But the other 80%, those people just can't make bail. And that means, they have to go someplace and they have to give whatever amount of money the judge says for them to be able to be out while their case is being decided. And that kind of system has been so destructive. It means, so what that selects automatically that 80% of people are poorer people. If you have more money, you get bail and you're out. And you see your lawyer every day, right? If you're on Rikers Island, the lawyer has to, and I could talk about this for a long time. It's a big deal to get to Rikers Island and see a person. It's a very difficult process to visit if you're a family member. But if you're the lawyer, there's a group of lawyers called the Legal Aid Society in New York that are contracted with the city. They provide the lawyers for people who can't afford them themselves. And they're good people, they're good lawyers, but they have dozens of cases each, and they can't do the job they want to be able to do. So that's a problem right there. So the system, and there aren't enough judges, there aren't enough courts. The system results in, I don't know this statistic, don't quote me, but it's something like 90% of the cases are decided by plea bargaining. Plea bargaining is the lawyer says, oh, the guy's charged with robbing a bank. Maybe you could reduce the charge to breaking and enter, some lesser charge. And he pleads guilty to that, and he serves a shorter sentence, or maybe he gets out of jail now, and he's on probation.
Harold, one question. There are prisoners that are they're not prison. You said jail, not prisons. No, it is a prison. Okay.
Yeah.
That they should that they relieve people or not. I suppose there are prisons that relieve now with COVID people, so they are not stuck in the prison.
Well, that is, it's a long way around that I'm getting to that, is the way to make this problem in the prisons and jail not so bad, is to get people out of there who shouldn't be there. Get them out to some place. You know, it's not like the city itself is safe necessarily, but it's a lot safer. It's something like 10 times the rate in Rikers Island is in the rest of the city. So reducing the population, that has been a goal for people. And I haven't been working there, but I've been trying to help sometimes the people working to close Rikers Island. And I should have worn my T-shirt that says "Close Rikers." For many years now, they've been working, and now it's the official policy of the city. But by 2026, I think the policy says it should be closed. But that would be the answer: is to get the people that shouldn't be locked up out there. And of course, the public is ambivalent about that. Oh, letting people out of jail, that's dangerous to us, you know. But I'll give you, I don't know if you know the case of a guy named Khalif Browder. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
The New Yorker wrote, the magazine, the New Yorker, had several articles about him that are very important to read. That really tells about this whole system I'm talking about. And I know that personally. I know back at the beginning of my work, a guy who was about 50 years old, a really nice guy, I got to know him because he wouldn't take a plea. He told me, I didn't do it. I'm not, and I never asked about that when in my work, but people would tell I was acting like a human being to them, so they would talk to me. And I didn't do it. I'm not going to plead guilty. They said I could get out in a year. No. I'm 50 years old. I never did anything wrong. I'm not going to plead guilty. That went on for a year and a half. And finally, the guy said, I can't take it anymore, Doc. I can't stand it in here. I'm going to take a plea and they'll let me out. And that's the kind of thing that goes on. There's tremendous pressure. If you go to trial, maybe you'll get a longer sentence. That's what the lawyer has to say to the client. Anyway, Khalif Browder was a kid. He was, I think, 19 years old. They arrested him for stealing a backpack. Okay, that was it. That was the charge. Not killing someone or robbing a bank or, and people can, by the way, were arrested for jumping the turnstile in the subway. You could wind up on Rikers Island for that. There were a lot of people there for minor crimes. Not all, I won't say all, but a lot. And so this kid, Khalif Browder, he was picked on terribly by the other inmates. The guards beat him up. There were videos of that happening. He was on Rikers Island for 3 years. And during that time, his case would come up. And then you have to take a trip in a bus and they make you wear an orange suit. So you show up in court, right, wearing an orange suit. Does that make a good impression on the judge? Or if you're on trial in the jury? No, it doesn't. And they bring you late, of course. They wake you up at 4 in the morning for that trip. And so he gets there. Oh, the lawyer isn't there. Or the judge isn't there. Well, we have to postpone it again. That went on for 3 years, right? And finally, a judge looked through the case. He said, this is ridiculous. I'm letting him out. There's not enough evidence he did anything. And he didn't do it, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
Even if he did, it wouldn't matter. He was a good kid. He went back to school. He was doing okay. And it was maybe a couple of months later, he committed suicide. That was a result of his 3 years of what people refer to Rikers Island as Torture Island. You know, it's a horrible place. And it's such a tragic story, but it epitomizes the way that whole system forces people who maybe they did a little thing wrong. They're forced into pleading guilty, even if they did it. But many times they didn't do it. And then they have a record. And the next time the cops stop you, and of course, if your skin is darker, the cops will be more likely to stop you. Then, oh, I see, you pled guilty for 3 crimes already. That doesn't look very good when you go to the judge. And so it gets worse and worse for people. So that's the system that made it be, 19,000 people there for years ago. But they've tried to do something about that. And people have been released. And now when the Close Rikers movement started, it was something like 8,000 or 9,000 people there. And there's really been a move, and the good people got elected in the last election to the state legislature. And they passed laws to make it easier for people to get out on bail, to make it easier, and to release people who are charged with a nonviolent crime. They don't have to have, because if you don't have any money, $10 bail is too much for you.
So you suppose that in Rikers Island there are a lot of people that they could release if they want, no?
Yes.
So why don't do it? Why do you think that they don't do it?
Well, there would be in fact more people already released according to the law that they recently passed. But it's public pressure. There are people who are afraid that, I mean, it's supposed to be the principle, you're innocent until proven guilty. So, but if you're a white person that has a little bit of racism in you, and those are Black guys that have been arrested for something, oh, they're going to let them out into my community. That's scary to me. There's public pressure that has stopped more people from being released. It's up to, I think, the district attorney. That's a person in each borough that has power over that. That's the person that charges people with the crimes. And the people who are charged with a nonviolent crime, they shouldn't be there. There's no reason for it. And a big problem now I'm thinking that has happened is what are called technical violations. The parole system, that's a whole other flawed system in this incarceration system, where a person is let out they serve some time, then they're let out, and they break one of the rules of parole. And the rules of parole are, I've heard people, people have experienced it, or they have nothing to do with public safety. So you'll have a guy, it's a true story, I'm not making it up. An example, one of the rules of parole, he has to be back, he's in a homeless shelter, he has to be back there by 11 p.m., okay? He was somewhere giving a lecture. People asked him to speak about the troubles in the jails, okay? He was late getting back there because he was doing that. And he explained what he was doing. He wasn't committing another crime. He wasn't doing anything wrong. the parole officer says, no, you violated parole. You go back to jail again.
The parole, what does it mean? Because I don't understand it. What is parole? If you
parole is a system where you serve a certain amount of time, and then they can say, okay, you've been good. You haven't broken the rules of the jail. You haven't caused any problem. You said you're sorry. You apologize to us every 5 minutes. Okay, we'll let you be outside for a while, but you are supervised during that time. And the supervision, maybe you have to show up and see the parole officer every day. You have to get a job. There are rules about it. And some of those rules are stupid. And by the way, you don't get back to your homeless shelter in time, and they send you back to Rikers Island. You lose your spot in the homeless shelter. So now you're back to being homeless again.
Harold, one question is, like, in the prisons in itself, just to know, if they get ill, they're in the dormitory together and eating together, and also, so when they get ill, do they have some facilities of having them in, or to what hospitals do they go when they get ill? If you have a COVID patient in the prison, what do you do with him?
Yeah, on Rikers Island, there are, I don't know, maybe 10 different jail physical buildings. And some of them have what's called the infirmary. And there is one building that's just for healthcare. There's a place where I used to work that was used when tuberculosis was acting up in New York in the 1990s. They had temporary buildings where they're like big tents made of metal, were built to house people, just to isolate people with active tuberculosis. I was still working there 10 years ago, so they weren't temporary, and they're still there. They use them to isolate people. So there are facilities, and the healthcare people, and each facility has a clinic where someone gives a note to the correction officer, I'm feeling sick, or I want to see the doctor for something, or the doctor gave an appointment to come back. Then the correction officer, if he or she feels like it, and they don't always feel like it, they'll bring the person to the clinic, or else they'll take their time, and it'll be too late by the time the person gets there. Or they say, oh, you don't want to go today, here, sign a refusal. They'll talk the person out of it. It's even that. And if there's a list of people supposed to be seen in a clinic, half of them never get there because the correction officers sort of make a barrier.
So that must be a very chaotic situation just now.
Yes. And so there's a certain amount of care, a certain level. If you get sick enough, they'll put you in the infirmary, it's called. That's not like a hospital, don't get me wrong, but it's a better level of care for someone who's sick, clearly sick, and can't go back to their cell. If you get sicker than that, you have to get sent to the city hospital. And there's just 2 of the hospitals that take the inmates from the jail system. Bellevue Hospital, where I work, and Kings County Hospital, that's Brooklyn. Bellevue Hospital is the oldest one. It's from 1840, the oldest hospital in the city, in Manhattan. And there's actually a prison ward in that hospital. And the system was so, people ask me about my work there. Were you ever scared? There were maybe 3 times in 35 years I was scared. But was it difficult? The most difficult thing was the frustration of the bureaucracy. There were times, a little example of that. I would see somebody, I was acting as a neurologist. So, oh, the person needs say a CAT scan. Okay. I have to send them to the city hospital to get an appointment for the CAT scan. I can't make the appointment directly, even though I was working in that hospital at the same time. And it actually happened that I'm in Bellevue Hospital and they bring in an inmate, and sure enough, it's the thing I wrote myself to me now. And I make the appointment for the CAT scan. Now you have to realize maybe 3 months went by from when I originally sent the person. Now maybe another 3 months will go by. And it almost never would happen. Everything would break down. The tests wouldn't
But not now, but with COVID, it will be impossible. They have to react, or are they doing it in the same way just now?
I don't know. I don't know how it is now. I think it's better because I know now a thing I was advocating for a long time. I worked for the union representing the doctors for a long time, advocating that health and hospitals should run the care in the jail system too. Then that kind of problem wouldn't happen because it would be one system. There would be their own doctors in the jail, so they could make the appointment, or they could send the person to the hospital directly. And that finally did happen, but that was after I never experienced that myself. That was
Harold, one question, because you saw the people also, I suppose also the psychological, how it was for them, the lockdown and being in the prison. So now all the humanity is in a lockdown like this. Do you see similarities about the people? Yeah.
Well, yes, it's well, people say I feel like I'm in jail now when you can't go outside. In a way, there is something similar. I mean, a couple of things come to mind. A quote from Bob Dylan: "Some of us are prisoners, some of us are guards." It's one of his songs. And there's a book by Foucault that basically, I think it was a difficult book to read, was saying we're all in a prison. It's all a prison. It's not like a separate thing. We're in a different kind of prison out here. So yeah, I think there's a similarity. The trouble is we still have some free will here to some extent, but the people in there don't have any. They don't have a choice. If they complain, they'll get in trouble. Things will get worse for them, but yes, it's true. People will feel that the same way. It is a similarity. It's ironic. It's good for people to understand what it's like, I think. Maybe they'll have more sympathy for the people getting locked up in our name. So yeah, but I think things have to be better than when I was working there, because there have not been a lot of deaths. I think. I'm not sure about that.
They have Weinstein there now, no, or not?
Which?
Harvey Weinstein, is he not in Rikers Island?
I hope so. I wish him all the best. But he was sent there, it's true. But people like that, they get special treatment because it's not like the staff likes them necessarily, but they don't want anything bad to happen to someone famous, right? Because they'll get in trouble. So they're especially careful when someone, like if Harvey Weinstein, if he's there, or that guy, the financial guy, he was the French guy, what was his name? He was on Rikers Island for a while. He raped a housemaid in a hotel. They used his initials for his name. I'm forgetting now. Strauss or something. Anyway, that guy went to Rikers Island. I'm sure if he, if he got a cold and he said to the guard, I need to go to the clinic, he'd get there right away, immediately. Anyone famous gets a special treatment in that way. But yeah, there are some. I had some famous people or infamous people as patients. My most famous one was a guy named Larry Davis. He was famous because his occupation was making deals with drug dealers and then stealing the drugs from them when they were so he was, and he also, all the drug dealers hated him. They were all after him. Then the cops were trying to arrest him, and he was running through the city. People were hiding him for maybe 2 weeks. He got away. He shot at some cops. I think he wounded a few. So now the cops were after him too. So when he went to Rikers Island, he didn't want to go up into the state prison because up there they were waiting for him. All the drug dealers are waiting to get even. The correction officers are waiting to get even. And so he was constantly making up fake illnesses. And I would see him sometimes. I got to know him pretty well. It was scary to me that this guy, they were all scared of him. He was very big and scary looking. I'd see him in the hall, and he would be in leg irons with 3 guards around him. And he'd go, hi, Doc, how are you? And the correction officer would be very impressed that I knew him like that, So that was my most famous.
And now, and you told us, you told me that the prison was so terrible. Is it as terrible now, or why was it so terrible?
Right. There were investigations done that forced it to get improved to some extent. There was a federal investigation. There was a guy that Donald Trump fired, actually, a prosecutor, Preet Bharara, his name was. Yeah. He led an investigation on conditions there, and it forced the city government they were under an order that they had to fix things. It was something, it's just violence, summarize it in one word. The inmates would be violent to each other, and the guards would be violent to the inmates. And for example, if inmates were fighting, I saw this happen. The guards their attitude would be, I'll let them finish fighting, then I'll go and break it up. I won't intervene while they're fighting. Maybe I would get hurt too. No. And the guards would beat people up they didn't like. Someone talked back, they beat them up. I think there are links. If you see the story about Khalif Browder, there's actually a video of him getting beaten up by the guards for nothing, just because they find it amusing. And I'm not saying everyone is a bad person. I got to know some of the guards. They were decent, regular people. But a lot of them were really not a lot of difference between them and the inmates. A lot of the guards come from the same neighborhoods. They have the same ethnic background, and maybe they started out poor, and they see themselves as maybe a little superior now to the inmates. But it was terrible, out of control violence, slashes with razors. I saw one person came to the clinic. He had a cut on his back that was the whole length of his back, cut by a razor. People's face would be cut. Horrible violence. And there was even, the inmates would get anything they wanted. If they had money, they would get a gun even. Completely crazy for a correction officer to take money to bring in drugs is bad enough, but take money to bring in a weapon, that jeopardizes them and all of their, co-workers. lives. But they did that. There were times, there was one correction officer I remember was arrested for that. And, you know, it was a very violent place. There's a video, right? I'll send you the link to that. I actually know the person that worked on it, called Rikers. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was on.
No, I can have. You can send it to me later, no?
I will.
Yeah.
It's very, that will tell you the answer to that question better than anything I can say. It's an hour of 6 guys, I think, just them talking about their time in Rikers Island. And I mean, I experienced that. I talked to people who said, I can't imagine, during the crack epidemic especially, there was so much crime committed because people would be out of their minds crazy with that drug.
Yeah.
And
Don't
people would say to me, I can't imagine that I did this. I killed my best friend. I can't believe I did it. They were horrified themselves.
Yeah.
So, but it's a terribly violent place, terribly violent and out of control. There was no attempt to decrease it. It's better now, there's no question.